Hello class, welcome to the perspective grid demonstration video. I have my 18 by 24 white drawing paper taped up to the back of my drawing board here. I taped it to the back of my drawing board because I know that my ruler will get caught on the clips that are on the front side of the drawing board. So I'll put it on the back just to make things a little bit easier. Right now I'm measuring to find the midpoint of each side of the paper. So I know the paper is 24 inches tall and I'm trying to measure down 12 inches. So I can get the midpoint of both of those sides. Now I'm going to draw my line across the paper. And the reason I'm doing all this is because I'm trying to find the center point of the paper. Now I'm going up to the top and I'm measuring left to right. And I'm trying to find the midpoint of that side up there. Again, this page is 18 inches wide, so the midpoint's going to be at 9 inches. So I measured 9 inches from the edge, and now I'm drawing my straight line down from the first tick mark I made at the top to the bottom tick mark that I made at the bottom. And as you can see in the very middle of the paper, there's that midpoint where the sort of lines intersect. And then from here, I'm measuring 4.5 inches to the left of the midpoint and 4.5 inches to the right of the midpoint. And these are going to give me two of the edges to my frame that I'm going to end up drawing within for this demo. And I moved my ruler on down the line there and did the same thing. Measure 4.5 inches to the left, 4.5 inches to the right. And then I drew up straight to connect those dots, those two dots. And I know that's going to be the right edge of my frame that I'm going to draw within today. And I'm just repeating that process on the left side here to create this other edge, the left edge over there. I just pointed to the two different edges. It's a little hard to see in the video, but there's two vertical lines that are parallel to the vertical edges of my paper, both 4.5 inches to the left and 4.5 inches to the right of that center point. I'll show you a still frame image pretty soon. Now what I'm doing is measuring up 6 inches because I want this frame to be 12 inches tall and 9 inches wide because it fits nicely within this structure of the 18 by 24 inches. And it's a good frame for y'all to be using. This 12 by 9 frame is 12 inches tall and 9 inches wide. That sort of window is a good window to work in for this project. This is the perspective grid part to this project. This is what you're going to begin with that will help you plot out everything and lay out everything within your imagined interior one-point perspective space. What I'm going to do now is just kind of reiterate these lines so that they become a little bit darker. It's a little bit easier for you to see in the video. And so what I'm easier for you to see in the video. Now I need to connect the two dots at the bottom here to give me the bottom frame, the bottom edge to the frame, and connect these two dots up here to give me the top edge of the frame. You can see that line a little bit better there. And again, I'm just kind of going back over these lines so you can see them a little bit better in the demo. See, they're really starting to show up now. And again, this frame is 12 inches tall by 9 inches wide. And, you know, if you just use that method that I showed you to find the center point of the page and then sort of measure out from there, you're going to be able to make this frame centered perfectly pretty much within the white paper. Now what I'm doing here is I'm making little tick marks, little dots on the bottom edge of my frame at exactly 1/2 inch over and over and over again. So since it's 9 inches wide, there's going to be 18 dots across that way, or 16 dots, one at every 1/2 inch. And the corners of the paper, the corners of the frame count as, one of those dots. And now I'm doing, again, those tick marks at every 1/2 inch section. Tick marks at every 1/2 inch point, going all the way down from top corner to bottom corner. And so you really do need a ruler for this project. I would suggest the 18 by 24 ruler. Ruler. After these beginning stages of the drawing, you won't really need to measure anything, but in terms of centering the frame in the middle of the paper, I'm not so sure that you'd be able to do that without a ruler. And one reason that's important is because if you wanted to actually frame this drawing, if you're proud of it and want to frame it at the end of it, having it centered is going to make framing it much easier for yourself and for whoever you might take it to for it to be framed. And again, I'm still just repeating this process of adding those tick marks at the 1/2 inch mark over and over and over and over again across every one of these 4 sides to the frame. And that's because all of these tick marks are going to be used to project back to a singular vanishing point, allowing you to project and understand where all of your orthogonals should be, and it will make it possible for you to add certain objects, whatever objects you want really, into the perspective space. And what I'm continuing to do right now is projecting all of those tick marks that I drew along each side of the frame. Right now I'm just working on the ones at the bottom of the frame. I'm taking each one of those marks, again, that are drawn at the 1/2 inch point, every 1/2 inch point across the bottom edge of that frame. I'm taking each one of those back to the vanishing point. I'm now erasing some of those extraneous lines from earlier, but for this stage, you're trying to bring back all of those 1/2 inch points back to the vanishing point. Again, that's going to help you project things into the environment according to perspective, giving it that illusion of three-dimensional space. Here you go. Just keep lining up each of those 1/2 inch points and bringing them back to the vanishing point, you got to make sure that you're pretty accurate with your pencil going into the marks and going back to the vanishing point, because if you're a little bit off over and over and over again, it's going to end up showing up and things aren't going to be looking as if they're receding back into compositional space the way that they should be. So you really need to make sure that you're lining your ruler up, with the point that you want to bring back into space, but then also line it up with the vanishing point as well. And I'm continuing to, again, go from the vanishing point forward to my tick marks all the way up the side here. And I keep doing this all the way around. And I just made a cut just to kind of skip ahead a little bit. I'm still drawing from the tick marks all the way up the left edge of the frame here back to the vanishing point. You can see it, all of those little dots going back to the vanishing point there, all the way up the left edge. And now I'm going to repeat that exact same process going up the right edge of the frame here, going from the vanishing point forward to the tick mark that I'm lining up my ruler with, and I'm going to skip ahead. And now I'm finishing up the orthogonals for the right side of the frame, and now I'm doing the same exact process starting from the top left corner. I'm going to work my way all the way over to the top right corner, again finding each one of those half-inch points and projecting them back to the vanishing point. And now I'm finishing up in the top right corner, just about done with this top edge of the frame up here. And again, you can kind of see in the video all of these orthogonals going back to that singular vanishing point back there. Again, this is a 1-point perspective space that we're trying to draft, not a 2-point perspective space. So just do 1-point perspective for all of this. Just plot where I'm trying to establish the vertical wall plane at the back. So now I'm lining my ruler up, trying to make it perfectly vertical, perfectly parallel to the side vertical edge. And I arbitrarily picked a line to establish the wall plane back there, the back wall. And the deeper you put it, the sort of longer your floor plane is going to be. The bottom of the drawing here, all of those orthogonals going back, those are all signifying the floor plane. What I did there was I just kind of reminded myself what diagonal going back into space is the bottom corner where the wall meets the floor on the left there. And that dark line I just drew in is the bottom left corner where the wall meets the floor in this sort of imagined space. And once you find the very back corner of your wall, you're going to want to project that over and do it in a way that's parallel to your horizon line. And I'm just repeating that process from the top left corner here, making sure that I know where the corner is, again, where the ceiling meets the wall up there. And these 2 points that I'm lining up right here always need to be perfectly vertical, because that vertical line that I just drew in establishes where the wall plane ends at the back there, okay? And it creates a back corner to the wall. And if that isn't vertical, then none of the other corners on that back wall will line up properly. As you can tell, I've now established the left wall in my imagined 1-point perspective space. What I just did was measure from the center line of the space down to the bottom corner of the wall back there, and I'm just measuring it as I go across to make sure I can make a horizontal line in a second that feels and looks perfectly level from left to right and is parallel to that center line that's going across the middle horizontally in my drawing there. Now I'm drawing from this front bottom corner back to that point that I drew there in space, and that signifies where the floor plane meets the wall plane there on the right side, on the right corner of the room. And I'm just double checking that I know where that center line that goes across is located. It's pretty easy to get lost in all of the different lines that you will end up making throughout this process. I'm measuring up from that center line that right now, trying to make sure that I can level out these two top corners of the ceiling at the back of the room. And that line I just drew signifies the area moment where the ceiling meets the wall at the very back of the space back there. Now I'm drawing back from that top front corner of the frame there, connecting that point with the point that signifies that spot where the ceiling touches the wall at the back. Again, to designate that top right corner projecting backward into space. Now I'm drawing from this point down to that point the line that designates that back right corner of the room. As you can see, I moved the tripod in closer to get a little bit more of a detailed look. Now what we're trying to do is create the sort of checkerboard patterning to the floor, right? This is where the grid component comes into play. And what you have to do is connect with a line that very back left corner of the room with the very front right corner of the room that we see, creating that diagonal. And what I'm doing right now is making tick marks wherever that diagonal crosses an orthogonal, okay? And what that does is it's going to tell us where we need to put our horizontal lines, designating the sort of imaginary tile shapes on the floor that'll help us project all of our objects in space. So if you look carefully, you can kind of see all those dots there. You see how they all cross the diagonal and the orthogonal at a certain point. that tells you where you're going to end up putting your horizontal lines, which I'm going to do right now with my ruler. And when you put your horizontals in, you're using the ruler, you're anchoring it at the one point, again, where that diagonal crosses the orthogonal. And you're just going to try to keep your ruler as parallel to the line below it as possible. And just kind of eyeball it. I'm not going to make y'all measure out every little section of the line to make sure it's perfectly level. We're just going to use our eyeball for it, and make sure that this line goes all the way across the floor plane. With this one right here is where I realized that I'd only been drawing from the diagonal over, and I needed to go back and correct that and project the line all the way to the bottom corner of the room there. So you can probably see the grid finally developing right now. Okay, now it's finally starting to feel like a grid because we have all of these different grid boxes, 4 different full rows of grid boxes down there. Okay, so there's another horizontal line I did, and you're going to do this all the way back every time the diagonal crosses over one of those orthogonals. You got to put a horizontal line all the way across the floor, and it is a somewhat tedious task, but as you can see, it's already sort of presenting this matrix of depth back into the space. And without all of these strategies, we wouldn't be able to plot anything into this imaginary 3-dimensional illusionistic space. So keep going all the way back, and as you can tell, the tiles start to get much smaller. But it does create a believable sensibility in terms of depth receding back into the composition. And so this is just for the floor. This is for the floor plane, but you're also going to do this for the vertical sides and the ceiling of your space, especially if you're thinking about plotting something on the ceiling of the drawing. And in just a second, I'll be repeating this process, but in a slightly different way. What I'm doing to create these grid lines is I'm just lining up the ruler with where the bottom line touches that diagonal line that signifies the corner of the room there, right? And so I line up my ruler with that mark, and I try to keep my ruler as perfectly vertical as possible. Again, we're just using our eye here. We're not measuring out every little thing, just like we did for the floor plane there, but you should end up with something that's relatively accurate as long as you're paying attention. So again, I'm just pointing to it, that little spot where the horizontal on the bottom of the floor touches the diagonal that signifies the corner of the floor there, and I draw straight up from that point. And again, I repeat this process over and over and over again, constantly double checking to see if my ruler feels like it's parallel and that it's vertical and that it's parallel to the verticals to the left of it. I constantly keep checking that. And again, making sure my ruler is always lined up with the point where that bottom horizontal intersects with the bottom diagonal that goes back into space. And I keep just lining it up over and over, going all the way back down the wall. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead. And now I'm pretty much finishing up with this wall to the left here. So I'm sure you can really see the grid developing at this point. And so you're supposed to do this to every one of the four sides, okay? But you start off with the floor. And so here is a still image of what I ended up with. This is what it finally looks like. This is what I want your project to be at in the next couple days. You know, I would consider this a 1-point perspective, grid drawing. And I just wanted to recap that all of those little dots along the outer edges of the frame there, again, those are all marked and measured to half of an inch. Each one of the spaces in between those marks is a ½ inch. You need to be really precise about that. I can't really stress that enough. You need to be super precise with your measurements, or else it will throw off a bunch of your orthogonals, and it will throw off a bunch of the angles of the objects in your imagined space that you're coming up with. And here is an example of a progress image from earlier on when the left wall was established. And here's another progress image just showing you what it looked like as I was marking out the sort of section of the ceiling that meets the back wall back there. And here's another progress image of what it looked like when I had all four walls marked in. And here's an up-close shot of when I was laying in the grid on the floor plane right here. As you can tell, I had to draw that diagonal from the back left corner to the front right corner, and then wherever the diagonal crossed one of the orthogonals going back to the vanishing point, I had to make a little dot there to remind myself that's where I need to start drawing my horizontal lines based off of that, okay? So the diagonal came first from the back left corner to the front right corner, and then wherever that diagonal crossed all of those orthogonals going back into space, I made a little dot at all of those intersecting points and drew a horizontal line across. Again, when you're drawing these horizontal lines, just try to use your best guessing using your eye to try to keep the ruler level horizontally. They all need to be level all the way across the floor, those horizontal lines, in order for any of the perspective to make sense later on. And here is an in-progress image of me marking in all those grid squares all the way up the left vertical wall. Again, you put your ruler where the bottom horizontal lines on the floor plane intersect with that diagonal in the corner that signifies the corner created between the floor plane and the wall plane, and you project those points straight up using your eye again to feel out the verticality of each of those vertical lines, trying to make them all parallel to each other. And here is another progress image of what it looked like after I got the ceiling grid put in. And one more time, this is the last image that I ended up with after I finished my drawing. So I want your drawings to be at this stage in a couple of days. Again, I used the 18 by 24 white Strathmore drawing paper, and I used my 18 by 24 inch ruler, and I also used graphite pencils this whole time. I didn't use any charcoal because I knew I'd have to do a lot of erasing. And soon I'll make the sort of part 2 to this video where I show you how to put objects into this space according to 1-point perspective. All right, thank you. Good luck with your drawings.